Joe here from the Working Fans Podcast. And at the Working Fans Podcast, this is just a podcast that three lifelong fans created to have a place to talk comedy and pro wrestling. Now, our comedy podcast releases every Tuesday, while our wrestling podcast releases every Thursday. We release bonus episodes under the moniker Working Fans Presents every now and then. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, any major podcast provider. The important thing is just please like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to us. Now, we have started a new thing. We are now on Amazon and Audible. So those episodes release every Monday. And that's kind of going through the archives and just releasing our old episodes into new areas. So if you want to live through the process with us again, take that journey with us again, you can find us over on Amazon and Audible. Now, if you can't get enough of us in the audio form, check out our YouTube. It's youtube.com/C/Working Fans Wrestling Pod, or just search Working Fans Podcast on YouTube. We have the whole archive is up there. And if you listen to the Working Fans Podcast, you are more than familiar with the 531. That is our signature segment where we take your top 5 lists on a particular subject, vote it down to a top 3, and then debate it down to a top 1. Now, guys, if you want to hear 3 guys talk shit about comedy, wrestling, life, anything, you will enjoy the Working Fans Podcast. Fans, welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. Last weekend, we had back-to-back NWA events, but today we are talking 531, top light heavyweights and cruiserweights in the game. But first off, Dave, how you doing today?
Man, just like butt cheeks, we all come together, baby. I'm ready. Let's do this, man. Junior heavyweights. I want to kick this off, man. I got a little more list than you, so I'd like to kick it off with 2 people. All right, I'm going to give them back-to-back, if that's all right.
All right.
By the way, I'm fucking on fire. I'm doing great if I didn't say that, so excuse me. All right. We got Zach St. John. He brought – first of all, he said he loves this list. So he's got Dynamite Kid, Will Ospreay, Rey Mysterio Jr., 96-ish, he makes sure to point out, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko. Forgive the allergies, guys. The cat's back. All right, Jake St. John, he said Dynamite Kid, Tiger Mask, Jushin Thunder Liger, Rey Mysterio Jr., Ultimo Dragon, and Ask Me Again, and Hiromu Takahashi will be on this list. So the St. John boys, we did them back-to-back this week. Man, I like that he included Mysterio 96ers on Zach's list because Mysterio is awesome, and he became a better competitor. But, boy, that flying he was doing back in 96 was off the page.
Yeah, when he first came out, he was definitely unique to the game, and that's why he's influenced so many people, and I think he's going to show up on a lot of lists. Like, first up, Mike Caldwell from Mikey and Fred. He's got Ultimo Dragon, Rey Mysterio Jr., Jushin Liger, Eddie Guerrero, and Dean Malenko. And I think a lot of our list will center on that WCW Cruiserweight division, with a lot of the guys they brought in from Mexico, Japan, really that influenced today's style. Almost 100%.
Rey Mysterio, Ultimo Dragon, Liger. I feel like that could almost be your top 3 right there, but we'll see as this list goes on. I mean, obviously Guerrero, Malenko. We got some people that are going to make this list. I'll go right into Mike Flynn, who's got Ray Jr. again. And before he got all jacked up, Will Ospreay. So Ospreay makes another list. Hiromu Takahashi. Pre-WE Ricochet, and Bryan Danielson. Now, that's interesting about Danielson because he is a smaller guy, but I think everybody tends to think of him as that main event status guy now. But, yeah, I mean, You talk about a guy who could do it all on the ground, and is this one of the all-time greats? How do you not include Bryan Danielson?
Yeah, and cruiserweight, it is a weight class, but a lot of the times, especially you'll even see in Japan, it almost seems to be that class that's just below the main event class because like
Right.
in the last couple of years, they made a big note about Will Ospreay moving from that
Sure.
cruiserweight status to the heavyweight status. So it's interesting how it is a weight class, but it'll almost be like a class where you could be contender wise.
And to jump on that just a little bit too, Kenny Omega, they did the same thing a few years back with him too when he moved up in Japan in that heavyweight division. And it's one of those things too. I feel like as these guys move up and they get main event status, they're almost forgotten about as the top cruiserweights. You know what I mean? Like Jericho will make this list, I'm sure, by a few people, but we tend to think of him as Chris Jericho, main eventer. Whereas top cruiserweights, we tend to just keep that center to Ultimo Dragon, Dean Malenko, and other guys who never quite made it, with the exception of Rey Mysterio, to that upper world title picture. And Rey obviously only had a cup of coffee up there, but still.
Yep. Now the next person we have is Howdy Price. He is at Price Howdy on Twitter. These are one of the many Twitter lists we got. And he has an almost totally Japanese list. He's got Super Delphin, Grand Naniwa, Jushin Thunder Liger, Ikatu Hidaka, and Taka Michinoku. Now, Ikatu Hidaka, he showed up on some of the old MLWs.
I'm so glad I gave you those lists. Was not planning that. I didn't even look at that, but
I know between Grand Naniwa and Ikatu Hidaka, those would be some tongue twisters.
Bless you, my son. I'm a big fan of Liger. I've heard of Super Dolphin. I don't think I'm saying it.
Yeah, I believe he was on the Best of the Super Juniors coming over from Mexico.
Yeah.
A lot of that CMLL, AAA, New Japan crossover.
And I got Randy Oscar here. He's got Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio Jr., AJ Styles, and Christopher Daniels. So I think a little bit of that TNA influence on Randy's list there too. Obviously, AJ had a long career in TNA before elsewhere, and Daniels and they were killing it back then. AJ and Daniels, along with Samoa Joe, who obviously is not a cruiserweight, but all those guys.
Yeah, they were definitely killing it, and for years you could say that Impact almost kept them hidden. Like I would say they didn't break out almost to like their Ring of Honor. I mean, they were known in Impact and they had a certain exposure there. But I feel like when they hit Ring of Honor, they got a little more.
That
obviously AEW and WWE, they blew up more.
Yeah, that three-way, I think, is the one everybody talks about from TNA, where it was Daniels, Joe, and Styles on one of the pay-per-views they did. And it was like an X Division, whatever that was. We had to grab the X, Ultimate X match. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that's something I think that always people still talk about, but that's where they got kind of their first big push. But yeah, I think you're right. They soared to greater heights later on. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. Like Samoa Joe's not going to make this list obviously because he's just a bigger guy, but he had that same style too for a big man.
Yeah. Now the next list I got for you is Adam Huish from at Real Adam Huish on Twitter. That's Real Adam Huish.
Old Amazon wish list. Got him.
He's got Kidman, Malenko, Mysterio, Ultimo Dragon, and Tajiri. And like I said, a lot of that WCW, they really had the prime influence, I think, on cruiserweights outside of, they had the prime influence in the United States.
Yes.
Because a lot of these guys were brought in, like we said, from CMLL, from AAA.
It'd be very interesting if we had like a higher base Mexican or Japanese audience writing in to see what they would come up with. Obviously we have fans that are going to have that Japanese taste, but to have actual people who grew up on Japanese wrestling and lucha libre, it'd be interesting to see where there'd probably be some names on this list to be like, oh, where did they come from there?
Yeah, Roy Lucia, I'm sure would give us an interesting list since he was so based in the lucha libre in Southern California there.
Absolutely. All right. I am going to have some different people coming up on this list too, but right now we're continuing with the old favorites. I got Jesse from New Hampshire, and he's got Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio Jr., and Shane Helms. Now, Shane Helms obviously had his run as the Hurricane in WWE and actually had a pretty good run for a lighter weight guy with the Cruiserweight belts at WWE, as far as WWE goes. But he also had a hell of a run as part of 3 Count in WCW, too. And just an awesome guy to follow on Twitter. And cool to see that he's got some love on Jesse's list here.
Yeah, next list I got is Jason Bayless. That's at TEH_JAYBEE on Twitter. And he's got, in no particular order, Ray, Sean Waltman, Liger, Eddie, and Pillman.
Okay. I got James C. Palmer from Facebook. And he's got Ray Kidman, Hoovy, Petey Williams for that sick finisher, and X-Pac. So Petey Williams also makes a cut here. So a little different, I like that, though.
Nice. Yeah, I like seeing when like the random names pop in. Now, next, I got Jason Gross from Rockin' Randy's Rockin' Wrestling Group.
Well, he's one of our boys now. He's always heading up the list, so appreciate it.
Yeah, he's almost always first when I'll throw one up. He's got Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Shane Helms, Sean Waltman, and he said it was hard to decide on number 5, so he just didn't.
Well, his honesty.
Well, no, he just put hard to decide on number 5, and I just put in that he just didn't.
He did it. That's why I appreciate him. I got Rodney Malcolm coming in this week. He's got Hoovy, Ray Phoenix, Rey Mysterio, Thunder Liger, and Dean Malenko. So, okay, good to see Malenko on this list. I feel like maybe he hasn't made enough of these, honestly. And Ray Phoenix, also cool to see him because he's such an amazing high flyer, but also just one of the newer talents that's out there today. So maybe he doesn't have the history that a lot of these names have, but he's also probably the premier high flyer today, arguably. So
nice. Next up, I got Ice Cold Chris of the East. I can't read his Twitter name because my handwriting's a little nasty, but go search our Twitter profile. You'll see the question up there. But he's got Rey Mysterio, Jushin Thunder Liger, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, and Ultimo Dragon.
Very nice. I got Tim Parks from Facebook. He's got Eddie Guerrero, Crispin Raw, Nelson Royal, Billy Kidman, and Jushin Liger. I got no problem with Nelson Royal, but I do like an odd name, and it is funny to go with the rest of his list. You don't think Guerrero, Benoit, Liger, Royal. So, you know what? But good on him for bringing it. I love it.
Now, next up, I got Richard. He's at Smarkhausen on Twitter. He's got 2 lists. He's got an all-time list, which has Dean Malenko, Tiger Mask, Rey Mysterio, Jushin Liger, Ultimo Dragon. And his current list is Ilya Dragunov, Kushida, Darby Allin, Johnny Gargano, and Cedric Alexander.
Very interesting. Nice to see Dragunov getting some love, too, after his amazing performance at NXT, defeating Walter for the belt last weekend. Again, not necessarily a guy I think a cruiserweight because he's just so smash mouth and he's fighting heavyweights. But interesting to see those people making that list. I appreciate him dividing it up in both. I got Justin Baker from Facebook. He's got Ultimate Dragon, Liger, another one, Bryan Danielson, Psychosis, and 123 Kid, and any other name he had.
Wow. Now, my list is last. I've got Juventud Guerrera, Dean Malenko, Ultimo Dragon, Jushin Thunder Liger, Rey Mysterio, and Jake Rules in effect. I had to put Kushida in that 6th spot.
I like that. Also, somebody on Twitter, I might not have sent it to you. I wish I could remember who. He did want to include Jamie Noble as one of his honorable mentions. So Noble,
yeah, I noticed that. I saw he wanted to add that, but I couldn't find his whole list.
He might not have got back to me. I think you are correct. So shout out to whoever wanted to at least put Jamie Noble on there. I got 2 more lists in my mind. Last from Facebook, Jason R. Deal, in no order. Jushin Liger, Rey Mysterio, 123 Kid, Ray Phoenix getting some more love, and Pac making some lists. All right, and then we got an oldie favorite here, Scott from Voluntown. He's back. He's got Jushin Liger, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Owen Hart, and Mysterio. Now, I also want to point out, Scott did tell me we might have done this list before. That being said, we're getting old, folks. We might repeat some of these once in a while. Fuck it. They're fun to talk about. So, that being said.
That being said,
solid
this
list.
did get a lot of responses, to be fair.
We got a ton of responses. Yeah.
You
So
know,
yeah,
not
nice
every
change.
list we throw out there gets responses, but I think that cruiserweight, light heavyweight style people like talking about. And it's also interesting to look back and see, go back and listen to the first time we did it. Are our answers now different than they were then?
Absolutely. Now, I got my list. Wrap it up. I got Dean Malenko, the Dynamite Kid, who should have got more love, Jushin Liger, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Jake Rule times 20. I got several honorable mentions. X-Pac, Owen Hart, Ultimo Dragon, and I put in Brian Pillman because Brian Pillman with Jushin Liger was some of the first guys that we highlighted in North America in the early 90s with the light heavyweight style. WCW brought Liger in. Bill Watts created the light heavyweight division, which was kind of unusual looking back, given Bill Watts' its history in loving heavyweights. But we had Pillman versus Liger, and they had some great matches, and they tore it up.
Yeah, now getting down to the top three, got to be Mysterio.
You got to have Mysterio, who was on every list.
Liger.
Jushin Liger's got to be there. And, you know, we had so many names mentioned, but for me, I think the guy that maybe belongs on that list, you could argue several people, but when I think of cruiserweights and I think of successful cruiserweights, and I think of all time like credibility, I'm going to go Ultimo Dragon. The 9-10 different titles he'd have on his waist, everything.
Yeah, he was probably the original belt collector. If I'm not mistaken, he opened the Toryumon gym that spawned, like Okada was one of them. And that ended up turning into Dragon Gate, which Dragon Gate had a Japanese promotion. They had a US promotion. So he was big then, but his influence on the business is even felt today in a major way.
Yeah, and I want to throw one something out too. I think people that listen to this show and know me, I don't just shit on WWE. You know, like I try to like call it really down the middle, and I reel us in sometimes. Like, okay, I might like this or I don't like that. Criminal what they did to Ultimo Dragon. That man should have got way more of a push than he got in that company. Absolutely horseshit. So let that be known too.
All right. Well, speaking of criminal, we're gonna knock him out first.
Yeah, he's gotta go. That motherfucker ain't Liger or Mysterio.
Yeah, honestly, it's like these guys have all had huge, like we said, huge marks on the business. I outlined what Ultimo Dragon did, but if you look at it, Rey Mysterio still going today. Liger was still going up until a year ago.
Yes.
And
by the way, I remember we did this list before. It was me and AJ because we got down to Liger and Mysterio too. But then we did the two bets. And I got to tell you, I don't remember what AJ's point was. I know, like, I love the fact that Liger, you know, he had the comic book going and he's such a national treasure in Japan. But to me, Mysterio became the guy. And when a guy like Iron Anderson says, if I have 10 wrestlers, I'm going to put in my Hall of Fame, and Rey Mysterio's on that list at a lot of smaller guys, and he says because despite his size, he made everything so believable. A guy like Iron Anderson says that, and the fact that despite his size, you just heard what I said when WWE did the fucking Ultimo Dragon. They put the world title on Mysterio a couple times. It might not have been long runs, but the fact that he was even there is fucking insane. So to me, this is a guy who just transcended. I mean, he's one of those names. I don't think he's like obviously Cena or Hogan or Austin, but I think he's one of those names that casual fans might know. You know, we go, oh, Rey Mysterio, the guy with the mask that does all the jumps. You know what I mean? Like he just became me one of those marquee guys, and I think he's the guy that should have this.
Yeah, 100%. And Dave, you know what the music means. Our top light heavyweight, Rey Mysterio. Folks, join us again next week, and we will talk to you then.